Distinguished participants, colleagues, you've heard from our researcher, you've also heard from an elder. I wasn't too sure whether it was an elder or someone that was pitching something to get the much needed resources to those that are actually engaged at the ground, which are our rural communities. And again, if we can please put our heads together for those two voices. We now move to what government is doing. Some of the works that they can be able to share with us. The conversation of biodiversity in our big blue Pacific. And we are blessed with the opportunity to have Adele share a bit of what Palau is doing in relevance to be able to talk to us about this important topic. Adele.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, everyone. I don't know what I did to earn my place up here, but I will try to keep up. I will give a little bit of a government perspective, but since this is a Tok Stori session, I thought I should share something personal. So I have a friend who is not in the environmental sector, but who does science work. And we were talking one afternoon, and we were talking about just how people were involved in these conservation environmental initiatives. And we got to talking, every scientist in the room knows the bell curve, right? We're obsessed with the bell curve. And we talked about people in terms of their socio-economic place in their society, in sort of distributed across this bell curve. And we have on the far left, very disadvantaged people in our community who very much rely on the resource. And then we have, I think, I'm in this other side of the bell curve, people who have enough to eat, have a place to stay, and to them doing these kinds of things is somewhat of a luxury. And the struggle was that you had this kind of two ends of these bell curve sort of agreeing on some of these kind of environmental initiatives, but the big bulk of the population was this in between, who didn't know, turn on the water and there was water coming out of the tap. They didn't know exactly where it came from and how it got there, whether there was enough of it. They went and bought fish from the grocery store. They don't know who caught it, if it was caught sustainably. And so we got around this discussion and to the point about how do we get to the people in the middle? The people at the two ends of the bell curve understand the story and the situation and I guess the sort of really alarming place we're at now. So how do you get to these people? So I've been struggling to answer this question probably for the last 10 years. And because it really, what is in this room is not the Pacific. We are at the very end of this spectrum where we have jobs, we have homes, a lot of us had access to education. We come to these meetings and we talk about these things as if, sometimes as sort of agenda items, right? These are not agenda items, these are human issues. And so from the government perspective, and sort of what are the instruments that are there for us to manage these people in the middle? And one of those instruments is the CBD, and then the associated sort of national primary implementing instrument of the CBD, which is the National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan. Every country in the room has one. I will try to go over some of the things that are in this plan for Palau. And I have a sense that these things are in all of our NBSAPs, and they're probably also in all of our strategic plans in your organizations that you're in. So the first one is on protected areas and managed areas. We've heard a lot about this in the last couple of days. Then there's species protection. We didn't hear very much yet about biosecurity and invasive species. So these, within our NBSAP, are these strategic intervention areas. The fourth one is a very hard one, integrating biodiversity and ecosystem services into development policies. The fifth one is reducing direct threats to biodiversity. The sixth is food security, which we talk about kind of peripheral to all the other work that we're doing, but I think is really essential in terms of our Pacific context. The seventh one is another fancy word that we like to use in these kinds of venue, is mainstreaming. Mainstreaming biodiversity. And that means in policies, but also in institutions, and then I guess in individuals. It takes individuals to mainstream. And so I would like to kind of talk about the first one is the protected areas and managed area intervention. Palau has really advanced on this strategy. The first legally protected area in Palau was designated the year that I was born. And that first protected area has developed into a system of protected areas. And initially, I'd like to bring in sort of the traditional knowledge. Initially, these protected areas were set up not because we had the science and we had the research institutions that do these kind of biodiversity assessments. It was really based on traditional knowledge of fishers and people who use the ocean initially, and then later validated by science. And this is probably the whole network of protected areas. So this is really, I think, key to how Palau's protected area story is. It wasn't because we had a science. It was because we had science in a very different form, in a form that we understood. And so this is really the birth of Palau's protected areas network, and really the extension of our protection into our EZ. Then I want to talk about a little bit about integration. Integration is a very difficult thing. It's a beautiful word to say. It's a nice title for a presentation to a conference like this. But in reality, it's like pulling teeth. Most people want to integrate work, but when it comes to rubber meeting the road, then there's turf wars. There's I don't do that kind of work. I only do this kind of work. So this is a very difficult, I think, area of work. We speak about it, we don't know how to do it. And I think it has to do, at least I think from somebody who is trained in the sciences. The sciences developed for specialization, right? It started out, and then it grew when people became specialized in what they did. And if you're a bird person, you're a bird person. If you're a coral person, you're a snake person. Whatever person you want to be. And now I think there is this movement toward this kind of multidisciplinary science, and I hope this is continuing, because I think this is kind of the nucleus of integration, is having people comfortable enough to work across multiple disciplines, working with different partners, working in these kinds of kind of gray areas. And then the last one I think is on food security. This is one probably I will share a little bit about. Our ministry was restructured in the last couple of years, and really one of the focus was on food security. And this was really, I think, we talked a little bit this morning about blue economy, and then now food security. So what are these big umbrella things that kind of bring the different, sciences together? How do you grow your food in a sustainable way? How do you ensure that food that is wild caught is there? So I think these kinds of new things that are emerging, these new concepts about sustainable blue economy, and then how do you these food systems discussions are really some of the platforms I think that can kind of drive us towards these more integrated approaches of dealing with really, I think, increasingly complex issues of our, not only the Pacific, but I think the world. I would like to close, I guess, my statement with another personal story. My passion is mangroves. Not a lot of people know this, and not a lot of people work in this space. You say you want to go dive on the coral reef, you have 20 volunteers, right? You say you want to go like trudge around in the mangroves where there's mosquitoes and you're dirty all day, you have maybe one person. And I say that because the mangroves are sort of in the fringe of a lot of things, and I think it represents kind of my personal story or my professional story of I didn't know where I belonged. So if you're a mangrove, you talk to the forestry people and they say, we just do the trees. We don't care about what is underwater. Then you talk to the fisheries people. They say, no, we just have mandate over the fish that go into the mangrove, but no, not the trees. So these kinds of fringe areas where potentially integration could happen, and potentially people like me who have sometimes undergone an identity crisis, whether you're a marine person or terrestrial person, I think these are the kinds of approaches to look at these kinds of complex issues. How do you work across your space? And feeling uncomfortable because you don't know whether you're a marine person or a science person, or if you're in this dialogue because you're a climate change person, or if you're a fisheries person, or if you're a biodiversity person. We're just people. And we have to work across these multiple spaces and at multiple scales. And so the challenge, I think, my ask, is that we need to kind of push through our comfort zones. If you're not a fisheries person, get to know a fisheries person, get to know what they're doing. If you're a bird person, get to know, I don't know, turtle person. But it takes people to work across these spaces. And sometimes we say, well, there's a shift in thinking that needs to happen. But we expect that shift has to happen into somebody else. And so I think we need to flip this and say, how can I shift? And then how can that person shift? And how can we meet in the middle? So that's my ask.